Well, here we go. And as I said, it is 6 o'clock in the morning here. We have our coffee. We're pleased to be here. We're over COVID now, and we're relieved that that is now behind us. In Canada, particularly in British Columbia, it's always customary and important and respectful to start with an acknowledgement of the territory. So I'd like to say that we're grateful for the Indigenous keepers of the traditional and unceded lands on which we live, learn, play, and work, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. This is part of our commitment to truth and reconciliation and to taking responsibility for our past and creating a better future. So who are we? Where are we from and what do we do? Linda and I both see ourselves as teachers. We were both, Linda was a primary and a secondary teacher. I spent most of my time in middle schools and secondary schools. We were principals. We worked at the district level. We worked provincially as senior policy advisors. And we've been running the network of inquiry in Indigenous education for the last 22 years now. And we've developed and teach at the Transformative Educational Leadership Program at the University of British Columbia. We love our work, we love what we do, we love our place, and we love sharing our story about how we're working together to create a socially just society in which every learner crosses the stage with dignity, purpose, and option. The logo that you see on the right for the network is an image of a spiral, and that's what we're going to be talking about this morning. So think of us as teachers with years and years and years of experience. One of the things that we've been working on as a system that has been really important for us throughout our whole careers, but particularly in the last 20 plus years with the network, is how can we use a network strategy to shift our whole system? And we want to move from a system that's focused on sorting to a system that's focused on learning. And for us, that means moving the emphasis from a focus on instruction and teaching to a focus on deeper forms of learning. We want to shift the emphasis from a summative assessment for grading and reporting to more formative assessment for coaching and learner agency. So moving the responsibility from the teacher to the learner. We want to shift from having teachers work in isolation to teaching teams working as learning communities, both within the schools and across schools. We want to move from competition between schools where we're competing for scarce resources, whether it's dollars or students, to deeper forms of networking collaboration across schools and communities so that collectively we can get better. We want to shift the focus from leadership by role, the focus on the individual, the principal, the superintendent, the director, the head teacher, to more thinking about leadership by contribution and a focus on leadership teams. We want to move from schools thinking solely about external accountability. What do I have to do to justify how we're doing to the province, the state, the authority, to more localized internal commitment and responsibility, where we take it upon ourselves to shift and change the experiences of learners. And we want to move from maintaining the status quo, where some kids do very well, to pursuing equity and quality for all learners. So that's the big focus of our work. And for today, in the 30 minutes that we have together, we want to explore how a shared framework can build coherence and change the experiences of learners. And we have 5 questions that we're going to invite you to explore with us. The first one is, what's your shared purpose? The second is, what's the spiral of inquiry and what makes it worth exploring? What are the stages of the spiral and how do we get started?
So the first thing that matters, this is Linda, and good afternoon to you, good morning to us, is being really clear on our purpose. And that requires us all thinking about what drives us to want to change the experiences of our learners. And to do that, we really want to make sure that we focus on the why, not just the how and the what. So being able to say in a really short, clear way what your big goal is or your big purpose, that has been a very important part of our work. And, you know, we are situated in, as you know, in North America, and our neighbors to the south have been very interested in short goals and small goals, SMART goals. But we've actually found that our Canadian educators and the networks around the world are more motivated by hard goals, setting really challenging goals that we can't get to unless a whole bunch of us get involved. And hard goals stands for heartfelt. We have to really believe them. They can't just be posters on the wall or a statement. They have to be just held in our emotions and really strongly held. They have to be animated. That means that we have to bring them to life. Have to see them as bumper stickers and almost, you know, written on t-shirts, made to really feel alive. They have to be required, but as Judy pointed out, they have to be internally required. They have to be because as we enter the profession to do strong work, to make things fair, to make sure that all kids learn, not just the wealthy few. And that's an internal requirement, our professional responsibility. And we found that they need to be difficult. Our equity goals, you know, in British Columbia, we have lots of young people who live in poverty and don't get enough to eat and don't get enough sleep. And reaching every single one of our learners is hard work, but we think that is the work, and hard goals really matter to us. Here's our 3 goals, and we've been working on these now for over 2 decades, and we will continue to work. We can see that we are making really good progress, and we're not going to give up until we get to 100%. So our first goal, and all of these goals have been hundreds, maybe thousands of teachers now have participated in the making of these goals. Our goal is that every learner in our province and in the Yukon will cross the stage with dignity, purpose, and real options. That means they get a strong, rich experience in schools, and they leave prepared to move into either the workforce or more learning, with having been really well treated. That's the dignity part, that they have a sense of purpose as they move forward, and genuine options, not just a piece of paper, but actually the credentials that allow them to move on to the first stage of their post-school life. Our second goal, we love this goal too, that our young people, I'm sure like yours, they enter school extremely curious. And our goal is that the young people are every bit as curious when they leave school. And that's got a lot to do with that shift from teaching and direct instruction to curiosity-driven processes. We've chosen an image of the outdoors because we're doing a lot of work outdoors now in our province. And the third one, for us, it's very important that every single learner, and that is adult and young person, gains an understanding of and respect for Indigenous ways of knowing. And we think that by learning that respect, that hasn't always been a part of our major focus, but it is now for all Canadians, and that will make a contribution to eliminating any form of racism in our schools. That's an ambitious goal, as I'm sure it would be for any country in the world, but that's our goal. There should be no place for racist comments or behaviors in our schools or in our society, and we're determined to play our part in eliminating racism. So you can have those big goals, but then you need a set of tools to get there. And that's what this is about. It's quite a straightforward 6-stage framework for team inquiry. It's very important that this is done in teams because You can't get to equity just by individual action. It has to be all of us. And the framework is designed to change, deepen, and improve the learning experiences of young people. It begins with talking to young people. That's where it starts. And it's research-based and it's evidence-informed. We didn't just make it up. It's got really solid research behind it. So you're listening to this session. Here are the reasons we think the spiral is worth exploring. Again, we're based in North America, and often in a country to the south of us, other people have been more important in trying to create change. And we think that change happens when teachers and principals decide to get involved. And we think it's important that they're at the center of the work, not just receiving laws and policies from above. We have to own it. It starts, we think this is unique. We don't start with huge data sets. We start by actually having dialogue with young people and listening to what they say. We write it down, we think about it, we find patterns, and we move from there. We focus on complex problems and impact. You can see that getting every kid 100% to a strong completion and eliminating racism and creating curiosity in systems that have been more about telling than creating curiosity. Those are all complex problems, and they all require positive impacts. We also think that the framework plays a role, certainly in our culture, in challenging biases and assumptions. We all have those, sometimes unconscious biases, and we have to put those on the table so that we can move forward in a good way. And it also incorporates the latest research on decision-making, as well as the strongest evidence about what makes a difference to teacher professional learning, what makes a difference as we learn as teachers, what makes most impact on students. So that research, mainly from New Zealand, is strongly built into the framework. It builds on Indigenous worldviews. The Indigenous cultures of Canada and around the world have a very holistic, very beautiful view of what learning is. And we think that as Western societies, we need to learn more about that because of their success in building collaborative cultures over a long period of time. It also develops adaptive expertise. We've all had lots of experience in our careers with routine expertise. That's how we manage to get through the day. But today's challenges require adaptive expertise, and we'll talk a bit more about that. It also models symmetry. We want young people, as we said, for example, to be curious and to be more outdoors. Well, if we want that, then as adults in the development of our work, in our professional learning work, we should be outdoors and thinking together and working in a problem-solving, service learning way. And the other thing about the spiral is that has been successfully applied across a range of contexts and countries. And just quickly, I'd say that one of our best applications of the work is we now have groups of young people who are using the spiral of inquiry and the decision-making framework to lead their schools in anti-racist work. And they're doing a really superb job. And they find that using this cognitive tool very helpful. So we're excited about that.
So the key proposition around the spiral of inquiry is that complex problems, and we're deeply respectful for the work that you're doing in School of 2030 to shift the curriculum and to make some big, hard changes in your system. This is complex work. And so our proposition is that complex works require adaptive expertise. That means that, as Linda said, we need to develop new expertise in response to these complex problems. And the only way that that new, more adaptive form of expertise can be developed is through collaborative inquiry. That comes from the work of of Helen Timperley, who is, from our perspective, the world's leading researcher on the forms of teacher professional learning that make a difference to students. And she has had a significant influence on our work. And we'll talk more about Helen in the workshop that's coming up. So what we're going to do next is just take you quickly through the stages of the spiral. So we're just going to provide a quick overview, and then we want you to think about particularly the scanning process and why that's so important. So at the heart of the spiral are three questions. That's always asking ourselves, what's going on for our learners? How do we know, and why does it matter? So this is deeply connected to the evidence and to not just going on our opinions or our beliefs, but really getting underneath it to understand the experiences of our kids. So we start with scanning, where we're going to do a broad range of taking a look at the evidence, both from formal assessments, but mostly from listening to young people. And Linda's going to talk about the two key questions that we want you to start with as we go through this. So we're going to spend probably 5 or 6 weeks as a team within the school, really being curious about what's going on. We're going to collect a lot of information. Then we're going to have to make a decision. And this is the focus stage. We know that if you're working on more than one goal at a time as a school or as a team within the school, you're not going to accomplish as much as if you have a singular important focus that everybody's agreed to. So we're going to apply the decision-making strategies at the focus stage to get really clear on the area. It may be critical thinking, it may be communicating learning, it may be mathematical understandings, it may be mindset, whatever it is that from your scan of what's going on for your learners has emerged as most important. Then as a team, we need to stand back and ask ourselves, how are we contributing to this situation? At this point, we're talking about our own practices, our routines, the kinds of experiences that young people have on a day-to-day basis. And we're looking at our behavior, our actions. This is not the time where we blame the families or the preschool or the government, but it's really looking at us. And from our perspective, this is really where we grow up as a profession, where we take professional responsibility, that internal responsibility for the current situation, both positive and negative. And then that helps us get even clearer about the importance of our focus area. Then we build in new professional learning that is directly tied to the focus. So if we're looking at self-regulation, then we're going to learn a whole lot more about self-regulation. If we're looking at social emotional learning, that's going to be our focus. The big message from Helen Timperley's work is that the most effective forms of teacher professional learning happen when they're directly connected to the needs of the learners. So you see how we're always coming back to the learner, to the young people in this process. The next stage is act. So we're going to take some actions, we're going to do some things differently, and then finally we're going to check. We're going to ask, are we making enough of a difference? And that takes us right back in. So the spiral is never ending. We're going to move back and forth through the process, and it is our desire that it becomes a way of life. So I'm just going to pause for a minute. We're watching the time carefully, and we know that we haven't got that much time, but we'd like you just in the chat for yourselves, or if you're together in a room, just to turn to each other, say, a thorough scan is key to the spiral. And why do you think that's so important? And why, from your perspective, is it important to listen to learners? So we're just going to time for 30 seconds, just a quick conversation, and then we will talk about how you can get started.
We can jump in, or
Yes.
I think it's really important to understand what are the real problems that we should solve, because if we start solving the problems that are not problems at all, then it doesn't do good for anyone.
Edith has just nailed the issue. So we couldn't say it better than that. If we don't really understand what the problem is from the perspective of the learners, we can be very busy solving the wrong problems or solving problems that may be less important. So that's the whole key here. So let's take a look at how you might get started. So there's some things that we were going to suggest, and then we'll take a look at a couple of questions. So this is teamwork. So find a friend, find a colleague. Ideally, there might be 3 or 4 of you. Ultimately, we want it to be the whole school, but get a friend to work with you. We want you to be curious about your learners. So start thinking about them, looking at them, listening to them differently. And start by asking yourselves this: do all my learners feel a sense of belonging and connection in this school? And do they find meaning and purpose in their learning? And this takes us right to the 2 key questions that, from our perspective, are at the heart of the scanning process, and that we encourage everybody anywhere in the world to start with these questions.
So it's Linda. I love these questions, and I really hope that you will do this. So we ask young people of all ages. There's different ways of doing it with really young ones, but can you name 2 adults in this school who believe that you'll be a success in life? And if their eyes light up and they say, yes, Ms. Halbert does, then we'd say, how does Ms. Halbert show you that she believes in you, so that you begin to get at the texture of how that's been communicated? This is the most important question in the world. It comes from a brilliant set of research work. 40 questions. This is the one that makes the most difference. So that's question 1. Question 2 is also really important. Now we've left social and emotional learning, whether young people feel that they have adults who have their back and that they belong to the school. And now it's question 2, asking young people, what are you learning? And learning what you're doing, what you're learning, and tell me why this is important. And this young girl, she's 7 years old. She's in Australia and Queensland. And in that school, they have a big badge that says, ask me, and the questions are on there. And what you're looking for is whether young people have a clue about what the big idea is that they are supposed to be learning. And often, sadly, they don't. They know the work that they're doing, but they don't know the big point of it. And so asking this question and getting good at it, and getting young people good at it, is critically important, we have found. So, your thoughts. This is what we'd like you to explore. Why do you think so many teachers are finding these questions critically important? Because they are. We've got networks all over the globe now, and people are using these questions and really putting them to work. And then here's a chance for you to, in your mind, because you're listening, not teaching right now, what answers would you like to hear from your learners? I mean, hopefully, we've only had 1 school in the world where 100% of kids had 2 adults at the beginning of the process who they felt had their back. As a matter of fact, they said they had 3 or 4 or 5. That was an exciting school. But often it's a small or even a big percentage of the kids haven't got those connections yet with adults, and they have to have them. And an amazing number of kids also don't seem to be able to articulate what they're learning, and we need them to do that, because that's a powerful metacognitive, self-regulated approach when you know what you're supposed to be learning and you know how you're making progress towards it.
We have a number of schools that are working on improving transitions for our more vulnerable learners. And transition is those points of change in their life, whether it's from home to school or school to post-secondary or foster care to home, whatever it is, those change points. And we found that there are 3 big ideas that are really framing that work. It's the idea of being, belonging, and becoming. So connected to these questions are the idea of identity. Do our young people known respected and believed in at their school? Do they feel a sense of belonging to their community? And through their schoolwork, are they becoming more, becoming better, becoming stronger? So these questions are fundamental to the spiral, and we hope you'll be curious about them. Then the next thing is just to share a couple of things that where you can learn some more. We've got a website. Clearly on the website are case studies from schools in British Columbia, but also links to networks around the world. We now have networks in about 10 different countries. We're quite active on Twitter and encourage you to follow the network on Twitter. We have a new resource that's coming out, a new book that's coming out in a couple of weeks, where we've taken what we've learned through the schools working with spirals for the last dozen years and tried to consolidate that into a useful resource for schools that are just getting started. A few years ago, we wrote a playbook, which is a really short guide to the spiral, just a condensed version of the stages, and that's freely available on our website. 2 years ago, we had we've been hosting study tours from a number of different countries. And as we moved into COVID and no travel being allowed, we developed a learning tour study guide for both virtual and in-person tours. And again, that's available free. And the decision framework we found has been extremely useful for teachers as they work through the process of the spiral. So just in closing, this is the image that we used initially when we started the network. It comes from Martin Hill, who's an environmental photographer in New Zealand. We just love the idea of the ripples flowing out from those floating stones and not being sure exactly where they're going to go. And Richard Wagamese is an Indigenous author, sadly deceased from Canada, whose work we absolutely love. And in one of his final books, he wrote, "As we paused by a pool in the river, Lorraine took up a pebble and tossed it in. In silence, we watched the ripples eddy outward in concentric circles and lap the stones at our feet. That's the way you change the world," she said, "the smallest circles first." So we want to thank you very much for your curiosity about the spiral of inquiry and really look forward to staying connected. So Paul Dees, thank you very much. And we're honored to be with you.